Hello, everyone. Good morning, bright and early from KubeCon, the day 3 in Los Angeles. And what a crazy week it has been. And I'm super excited today to have Lachie from the Microsoft team. He's a principal program manager, and he's a big name on the CNCF side. He's an CNCF ambassador. I have followed you since so many years, from working on the service mesh, Helm, been to a lot of your presentation, and I can just go on talking about you. But again, for our audience, if you would like to just introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the lovely introduction. I think that's very kind of you with those kind words. Hi, I'm Lachie Evenson. I work for Microsoft Azure, and I'm a principal program manager. And the team that I work on is called the Azure Core Upstream team. And we focus on working in these open source communities and bringing integrations into Azure and the Azure platform so that community and customers who are interested in building on top of these cloud native projects can have a great experience on Azure. So that's what we do.
Awesome. That's really good to know. Lachie, what are the some of the key announcements which you had during KubeCon? Some of the new services which Microsoft is providing.
Yeah. So a couple of key announcements that we've had this KubeCon. So the first one, and I was on stage yesterday. You mentioned that you were there, and
yep.
And we shared a journey on stage about getting a dual stack Kubernetes to stable and upstream. So this has been a Microsoft-led, we saw the need from customers and from the community, and we went in and worked with the community. It was a large collaborative effort across multiple companies and multiple years. I think it was 4 years in total. But the need we saw is, hey, if we bring dual stack, which is the ability to have IPv4 and IPv6 addresses on your Kubernetes cluster, we can really meet the need. And we saw, the rise of 5G and many telcos using Kubernetes to power their 5G networks. So we wanted to be able to support that growth. And so that's one. So what you can see today on AKS is we've actually integrated dual stack, and you can get a dual stack cluster just with a click of a button. So if you're interested in taking a look at how dual stack operates, you can try it on AKS today. So we've made it super simple. Next, we've enabled HTTP proxy. So what this means is customers sometimes want all their HTTP connectivity outbound of the cluster. So from your pods going out, they have HTTP proxies. So this allows you to configure per node pool specific proxies that traffic needs to go via. So I think that's a great piece. And then finally, you mentioned service mesh. So we're just announced the release candidate for Open Service Mesh, and what this means is we're going to a stable release, signaling to the community that it's production ready. And on the AKS side, you can actually deploy that with a click of a button as an add-on. So this is just, again, how do we give you a simple experience and give you the power of a service mesh? So yeah, that's been, I think, the 3 top things that we brought to KubeCon. So it's been exciting, and all those things have an open source component, and then we integrate them into products so that we can have those integrated elevated experiences.
That's really awesome. Again, there is a lot of interest in the developer community about open source, about service mesh at this point. So what are kind of some of the trends you are seeing, or some of the challenges as well with enterprises kind of onboarding into service mesh, and how is Microsoft making that process more seamless?
It's a good question. So I think I'll start with the value of service meshes, because there's lots of what are service meshes out there, and we took an approach where we listened to customers and spoke and listened to their needs. So OSM was just a direct response to that, and what we heard was, hey, one of our core needs is the ability to encrypt traffic on the wire. So all these connections between our services, we would like them to be encrypted. Is there a way that you can do that by default? And service meshes provide that through a mutual TLS. So that was one thing. Access policies. So instead of doing policy kind of at the network layer, can we do service to service policy? So can I say service A can connect to service B, and likewise, rather than IP address A connecting to IP. So bringing that service context and allowing you to configure policy around that. Observability, where's the traffic going? What are my success rates? And, some more advanced routing cases. So how do I shift traffic? So these were the main use cases that we heard. But we also really heard that the service meshes out there are really hard to operate, especially not only to install, to onboard, and then to upgrade over time. So one of our philosophies with OSM was actually to make it really simple to install and operate. And we went the extra step there by integrating that into product as well, into AKS, so that you can just say, I want OSM deployed on this AKS cluster. I think so. That's kind of where we're at now.
Absolutely.
So that's a great milestone. I said we're going to stable release and it'll be production ready. So, but looking forward, I think now that we have this service mesh, conversations I've seen here around how do we leverage that to do multi-cluster.
Yeah.
And there was somebody on stage 2 days ago, I think it was Caslin Fields from Google, and they said, through their research, it was about the ability to manage services across multiple clusters. That's what multi-cluster meant.
Yeah.
And we're looking to tackle that too. So we've done a number of demos, and we have some integrations with multi-clusters, and so that you can define a service in one place and have service-to-service connectivity for multiple clusters. So it's that I have many clusters.
Yeah.
How do I manage them? And again, it speaks to our simplicity message. So there's all this great tooling out there.
Absolutely.
But we want to bring that eye of how do we keep it simple and supportable and high quality. And that's, where we focus our efforts.
You talked about like multi cluster. Like what happens with a control plane? Like, is that a shared component there?
Yeah. So it looks like, when we ask customers, again, we want our, how we actually solve this problem to be customer led. So we are talking to them. What they're telling us is we want a single place to configure everything. So even if it is distributed control planes, not one single control plane that spans everything, we want one entry point to configure everything. And there may be multiple, control planes per cluster, one per cluster typically, but one central place to configure everything is really what they're going for.
Absolutely. That would be really awesome to have that, right?
So watch that space.
Yeah, absolutely. What about like the observability space? There are so many tooling coming up. Like, how is the integration of some of those toolings with service mesh looking like at this point? Yeah,
I think so. There's a lot of maturity coming up with Open Telemetry and Prometheus and all these tools, which is it's great. It's great to see the proliferation of all the tooling out there. So there's a big need that needs to be met by customers around observability, but some of the challenges with observability is the amount of componentry you need to spin up and manage, and the life cycle of those components. And the thing about OSM is it's integrated within, so it's not a separate component.
Okay.
And because all the traffic is going via these Envoy proxies, as part of the service mesh, we can actually just observe that traffic in the path and bubble up dashboards to show that. So
it's basically out of the box.
It's out of the box. You don't have to touch your code. Awesome. You just onboard your application and you get the observability as part of OSM. So, again, that simplicity message.
Wow. And Microsoft loves open source. Can you talk about like few of the key integration, I would say, like with Azure, and then we have so many CNCF projects.
Yeah.
Like how are you handling?
So again, what we see is, hey, there are enterprise customers that want to adopt Kubernetes, and they have technologies they're already using. So how can we bring those technologies into this cloud native world to help them be able to move onto the cloud and use Kubernetes? So our eye has always been, they typically have security systems, identity systems. And how can we present these things in a cloud native way? So one announcement we made just the other day was the CSI secrets store driver in Kubernetes. And now this is a piece of Kubernetes where it allows you to use Kubernetes secrets, but have them backed by a cloud-based secret service so that you can pull it in. So we deliver this out of the box. Your secrets are stored in Azure Key Vault, which has all the regulatory compliance and security compliance. And then you can pull them in and consume them just like you would any other secret. So this is a great story. It looks like Kubernetes secrets, but you pull them in from a backing store. So that's one. Workload identity and pod identity. So lots of customers have, Active Directory, and they want to use those identities and bring those identities in to Kubernetes. And with workload identity, we can bridge the gap between your Active Directory and using those identities for service authentication and identity management, which, again, is a a great message. And then finally, policy.
Yeah.
So we've done a lot of work in Gatekeeper, which is a project that tries to solve governance and policy in a Kubernetes cluster. And we've worked in the open source community to build that under the umbrella of the Open Policy Agent. And what we've done is we've built this component where you can define policy. So think of it, I want my containers only to come from our internal container registry. We can make sure that that happens. And if that's not true, we can block it from happening. So on the open source side, you can deploy that anywhere. But the product side, we have Azure policy for AKS. So it's an integrated experience built upon open source. For those who want to support it, an integrated experience, you can use the Azure tool. So I think, that's been our guiding light, is this simplicity, enabling developers to be successful, and integrating it into Kubernetes, because that's where those customers and that community is looking to solve the problems. But giving you a supported, high quality experience on Azure.
Thank you so much. Again, this was a great explanation. Again, there is so much of the cloud native space has grown so much in the last few years. I just wanted to know your thoughts on what do you see as the biggest trends in the next couple of years where the cloud native space is kind of heading towards?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been, we're on site in LA at KubeCon. I had the privilege of being able to go to some of the pre-day events because I was interested in, what some different things. Specifically, I went to the WASM and the Service Mesh pre-days on Tuesday. So that's my context. But I think, the meta takeaway for me was we've created this really strong community that is empowering developers to connect and collaborate with each other. And regardless of the problem spaces, they can spin up these unique little focus areas like WASM, eBPF, and supply chain security. I think the most tactical things that I've heard this week, supply chain security has been one, WASM and eBPF. And I think, if I was to go into what we're doing in those spaces, you saw on stage, Priyanka said the Open SSF, and that's the Open Secure Software Foundation. And, Microsoft committing financially and resources to actually building security solutions in these open source communities to address supply chain security. So we're investing in those areas. And even some of the tools I've mentioned, like Gatekeeper, we're doing integrations to do validation for signed containers and pieces like that. So I think that's a space to watch, coming really fast, and there's a lot of momentum there. And then WASM, so this is WebAssembly. So taking a look at, the cloud and the edge, and, the boundaries becoming more of a gradient rather than a hard fixed, this is the cloud and this is the edge. And what we're seeing is on these smaller, resource constrained devices, is there another way that we can meet their security and kind of the runtime constraints? So not many resources and a lightweight footprint, and distributing a lightweight footprint. So we've invested resources into WebAssembly to see, hey, can we take WebAssembly and integrate it into the cloud native kind of ecosystem? And if I was to mention one project, which is in the CNCF specifically, called Crosslet, it's how you run WebAssemblies in Kubernetes. So you can use the Kubernetes as your scheduler and, placement set of APIs, and it looks and smells like Kubernetes, but you're working with WebAssemblies. So, again, it's a great, how do we take the tools that are already out there and really, innovate in the industry and model out these new experiences with the community. And I'm just really happy that Microsoft is really investing in those spaces and, leading in these communities as well.
I went to the Microsoft booth yesterday, and I was looking at all the educational content. There are a lot of trainings on Kubernetes available. So, like, for someone who is just getting started with Kubernetes, what are kind of the resources you would kind of recommend for them to just get there? For like learning more on that area?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in Azure, we do pay a lot of attention to helping folks in the community and customers understand how to utilize Kubernetes and these ecosystem tools. So there's a lot of training on the Azure site. You can go there and get started for free and learn. But I think more broadly, there's how do we help, the industry get training as well. And there was a new certification announced by the CNCF, and I think it's great. It's an entry point to help people establish a baseline across the CNCF, spectrum of projects and solutions. So I think training is becoming more broadly available in the CNCF context. They have a lot of certifications and trainings that you can take, which is absolutely fantastic. And then in Azure, we are augmenting those things as well with certifications and integration. So as you said, you can come to the booth and actually spin up a workload on Kubernetes and integrate it into Cosmos DB and go through those things. So, we also have educational content in the form of did you see the Fippy and Friends books at the front? So that's a fun way to say, Kubernetes is complex. How do we bring a simple and a simple message to help folks who are getting started in this journey, and give them a way that they can start to understand what's happening here? Because, the community is becoming mature, but how do we actually help the next set of Kubernetes developers or developers on these cloud native technologies be successful and enable them to get up and running in the shortest amount of time? So really, that's our eye, is to enable those developers and help them have a great experience.
To all the developers, you just listen, right? That was a great piece of advice, basically. I just wanted to get your thoughts on KubeCon this year. You have been attending this conference over the last few years. So how was your experience? How was it different? Pre-COVID, this is the first time, again, I have been into an in-person conference. It feels great to be back, talking to people, getting an opportunity like here, just talking right in person. So what are your thoughts?
I think everybody was skeptical about the event, but it's surpassed my expectations in a number of ways. I think the content has been excellent. I've sat in the keynotes every day. And just the maturity of the ecosystem is really shining. That's been fantastic. I've sat in a couple of sessions. The content is excellent. You can participate virtually as well, so I think that's great. But for the in-person bit, it's the building new relationships and investing in existing relationships face to face. There's a piece of that I kind of underestimated would be a key value for these in-person events. So just getting time with people that you may have met online, and just building rapport with those people, I think is great, and that's really going to strengthen the community as we go forward. And I think that was a piece that was missing. So and then talking to customers at the booth has been fantastic, and folks in the community who have interest in the open source things that we're working on. It's been great just to get some face-to-face time and listen to their challenges, their successes, and understand, what they're thinking about, and that helps us shape what are the problems we still are yet to solve, and how can we move forward.
Absolutely. And again, I know we are running sort of time, but one last question. Again, at DZone, we have a very big developer audience, and they would kind of like to know, what are your thoughts and your advice to developers who are just getting started on the cloud native space? What are a few of the projects to kind of look ahead in the next few years? Just you mentioned about the CNCF certification, which is a great way to get started. But any other advice you have for the development?
I think if you're getting started, or even somebody who's experienced in this place, the tooling for developers is getting outstanding. And we're seeing that across the board. So, for example, at the booth, I've been talking about the Kubernetes extension for VS Code, and many people don't even know that exists.
Awesome.
So it's a great way to, you're not leaving your IDE, the context of your IDE, but you want to deploy something to Kubernetes. Now you get contextual tool tips to build out resources. You can deploy them without leaving your IDE. So this is fantastic, and we're seeing that code spaces in GitHub, Cloud Shell in the Azure portal. Again, it's how do we make you not have to learn the plethora of things in Kubernetes from the get-go, and start to focus on your code and focus on the problem that you're trying to solve in your code as a developer. And you can start to onboard, and if you want to go down into the Kubernetes and start using kube control and these pieces, you can take that route. but getting started, the tooling in the IDEs is outstanding, and I really, I think that's where we've got to get to. You can really go deep in Kubernetes if you want, and if that's what you're interested in. But if your goal is to write code and deliver business value, you may not have to know everything about Kubernetes. And how can we, abstract a lot of the complexities of onboarding to Kubernetes and create simple experiences so we can, empower developers to get, what they need to get done. So I think that's the opportunity here. And, while I'm somebody who likes seeing how Kubernetes works, I really appreciate when I step back and say, wow, look at what you can do just from your IDE. And for example, breakpoint debugging, right, which is something that's been traditionally very hard. You can go and just put a breakpoint in your code and start up a local, right-click, start local tunnel. It'll port forward a service running in a Kubernetes cluster back to your development workstation and allow you to do breakpoint debugging. Now, like the fact that I can just show that in a 2-minute demo is like mind-blowing to me.
It's pretty impressive.
It's a really good time to be a developer in this community because the tooling is getting excellent.
Yeah, and that's a great point which you mentioned. It's all about the developer productivity, and the tooling has kind of improved so much.
Yeah, and we're really taking that. How do we simplify? Because Kubernetes is vast.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do we, and cloud native is vast. How do we provide very simple entry points to get the value out of these things in the shortest amount of time and provide high quality solutions there?
Wow, that was a great piece of advice for all the developers out here listening to this podcast. So again, thank you, Lachie. I know you're pretty busy. Thanks for taking out some time to talk to us. Again, it was very helpful insights which you provided. Have a great KubeCon, and looking forward to kind of learn more of all the things which you have been contributing to the community. Thank you so much for your time.
Hey, we have a great team, and you can come and find us on GitHub or on the social network. So we'd be interested to chat to you and talk to you about your journey.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.